By 2030, Europe may actually no longer matter. And that's not an exaggeration. It's a trajectory. In 2008, the European Union made up over 21.5% of the global economy. Today, it's shrunk to just 14.5% and falling. In 2022, Germany, the continent's strongest economy, officially entered recession. In 2023, European energy prices shattered records. And by 2024, China and the U.S. had pulled so far ahead that Europe became a bystander in global affairs. The uncomfortable truth is this: Europe is no longer leading the West. It's being led, used, and increasingly ignored. From trade deals to tech, war zones to energy, Europe is not calling the shots. Washington is. And if this continues, by the end of this decade, Europe won't just be economically stagnant, it'll be geopolitically irrelevant. Please take a moment to drop a like and subscribe to the channel. Back in 2022, when Germany was gasping for air under energy price shocks, it wasn't Moscow that stopped them from turning the valve on Nord Stream 2. It was Washington. The U.S. threatened to sanction German companies and officials using a law designed to punish adversaries, not allies. And when that pipeline was blown up in September 2022, not a single European leader demanded accountability. Seymour Hersh reported that the U.S. was directly involved in the sabotage, and Europe's response? Silence. Because when your energy, your money, your weapons, and your media are all in someone else's hands, you don't dare speak out. This is the core of the problem. Europe is being used, not helped, not protected, used. America doesn't want a strong, united, self-sufficient Europe. It wants a weak, divided, and dependent market, a customer base for gas, for arms, for tech, a buffer zone for proxy wars, a launch pad for global conflicts. Look at the numbers. In 2008, the EU accounted for 21.5% of global GDP. By 2025, that number has crashed to 14.5%. Meanwhile, the US remains steady around 24%, and China has surged past 19%. Europe is shrinking. Economically, strategically, and diplomatically. The engines of Europe, Germany, France, Italy, are stalling. In 2024, Germany entered recession. France grew just 0.7% and Italy barely scraped 0.3%. Meanwhile, China grew at 5.2% and the US at 2.5%. That's not a slowdown, that's collapse. And who's benefiting? Of course the US, and massively too. American LNG exports to Europe hit over $60 billion in 2024, up from just $8 billion in 2019. Europe's energy crisis became a gold rush for US oil giants. At the same time, American weapons makers, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Boeing, saw record sales as NATO countries ramped up military spending. Poland alone bought $15 billion in US tanks, helicopters, and missile systems. Germany pledged 100 billion euros for defense, most of it heading straight to US defense contractors. This isn't protection, it's extortion. And while America arms Europe, it also ensures Europe can't build for itself. Efforts to build a truly independent EU defense structure are constantly undercut by NATO, a US-dominated alliance that answers to Washington, not Brussels. The result? Europe's defense spending is just a roundabout way to subsidize the US military-industrial complex. And it gets worse. Every time Europe tries to form new partnerships, the US steps in to block it. When Italy joined China's Belt and Road Initiative in 2019, it was a smart move for infrastructure and trade. By 2023, after mounting US pressure, Italy was forced to pull out. When France hinted at deeper energy ties with Iran or China, the US slapped down the idea with diplomatic threats and media pressure. Even Germany's once promising partnership with Russia on gas was obliterated, not by war, but by sabotage. The US keeps Europe divided for a reason. Eastern Europe is kept scared of Russia. Western Europe is scolded for engaging with China. When Macron called for strategic autonomy in 2022, he was immediately attacked by Washington and even some EU states as being soft on dictatorships. Translation: don't even think about acting on your own. But it's not just weapons and energy. The US controls Europe's digital future too. Europe banned Huawei under pressure, even though European telecoms admitted the Chinese company's tech was cheaper and more efficient. Now, over 70% of Europe's cloud computing is run by American firms like Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. The EU talks about digital sovereignty, but it's already lost that war. America runs the internet, the cloud, and the data, and Europe's tech giants are nowhere in sight. Meanwhile, efforts to escape the dollar are crushed. The Instex system, Europe's attempt to trade with Iran outside U.S. jurisdiction, was dismantled before it ever launched, because no bank wanted to risk U.S. sanctions. The euro exists, yes, but only with Washington's permission. Even Europe's youth are waking up. Polls in Germany, France, and Italy show rising distrust of NATO and growing frustration with U.S. dominance. Young Europeans don't want to fight American wars in Ukraine or Taiwan. They want jobs, housing, and affordable energy. But their leaders? Too busy checking Washington's temperature before making a move. Let's talk about that. Europe no longer has a foreign policy, it has a Washington policy. When Huawei was banned, it wasn't because of a European intelligence threat, it was a US directive. When warships from France and the UK sail through the Taiwan Strait, it's not for Europe's benefit. When sanctions on China or Iran are issued, Europe complies, even when its own industries suffer. Remember, over 100 European firms canceled multi-billion euro deals with Iran after Trump pulled out of the nuclear deal. Not because Europe disagreed, but because Washington told them to. Meanwhile, the US continues to expand its global dominance, drawing investment from Europe via the Inflation Reduction Act, poaching European factories and stealing market share in energy and arms. And here's the most painful truth. Europe's voice on the global stage is now irrelevant. When Israel bombed Gaza in 2023, European calls for ceasefire were ignored. When Saudi Arabia joined BRICS in 2024, Europe had no seat at the table. When the global south looks for partnerships, it turns to China, Russia, and regional powers, not Brussels. Why? Because Europe doesn't lead, it follows. Even Europe's institutions and media are quietly captured. Think tanks are funded by US foundations. Politicians who speak against Washington's dominance are sidelined. When German MPs demanded reopening Nord Stream 2, they were labeled Russian sympathizers and buried by the media. So let's be blunt. Europe is not a partner in the Western alliance. It's a client state, a subsidizer, a shield, a pawn, and unless it wakes up and reclaims its independence, economically, militarily, digitally, diplomatically, it will remain what it is today, a declining continent following orders, funding an empire, and sliding quietly into irrelevance. The world is moving toward multipolarity. The global south is rising, BRICS is expanding, China is building, the US is consolidating. And Europe? Europe is standing still, waiting for permission. If you enjoyed this video, please like the video and subscribe for more content.